Hi, it's Lauren. Thank you so much for joining me in my craft room today. I have another birthday card batch of cards using the sheet load of cards from Crafty Owl's YouTube channel. I will have her video linked down below so you can find out how to get a copy of this card sketch. I'm using a bunch of new Pretty Pink Posh supplies and I'll tell you about them as I go through the video. I also found this brown like houndstooth looking pattern paper in my stash. As always, a lot of the pattern paper I use in these birthday batch videos are retired, but I will link down below what I can. So I've trimmed down my pattern paper per the card sketch, and I also cut out some white cardstock that I apparently don't know how to cut out correctly, but I'm gonna make it work because that was a lot of white cardstock that I trimmed down. And I was really inspired by the colors of this pattern paper pack. On the back were these very pretty blue and green colors. So I'm going to stencil on my mugs onto some of this white cardstock using Distress Oxide colors that I thought matched the pattern paper really well. So that's pine needles and chipped sapphire. I have my dome foam blenders and I'm just adding ink in various spots onto the mugs through the stencil because I'm gonna blend the two colors together. So each mug kind of has a little bit of green and a little bit of blue to the best that I can. So I'm gonna go back and forth between these two colors. I have my stencil on top of my cardstock, which is on top of my silicone sticky mat from scrapbook.com. And then because it's sitting on top of my magnetic glass board, I'm using my magnets just to help me keep everything in place. My stencil did slide a tiny bit, but it was totally recoverable, and I'm just going to continue on with my ink blending. So like I said, I am going back and forth between the two colors until I'm happy with how my mugs look. I think these two colors are so vibrant and beautiful, kind of that jewel tone look together, that I can see this color combo coming back into my rotation. But for now, let's take a look at how those mugs turned out. Here they are, again, very pretty. They each almost all of them have that both colors, the green and the blue, but they look very pretty just as is. But I'm going to bring in the next layered stencil from the coffee cup stencil set from Pretty Pink Posh. And this time I'm going to use that ground espresso because this is a coffee card. So got to use the ground espresso Distress Oxide ink. And I've layered on the stencil so I could get coffee inside of all of my mugs, as well as ink blending the sleeve and lid to some of the coffee cups as well. Now, because I'm using dark colors, I will kind of go back and cover again those coffee lids because they overlap the cups just a little bit and you can see some of the blue and green through the brown, but really it's not too big of a deal. It's a layered look. It's a handmade card, so just have fun with it and layer on as much ink as you would like, or maybe use a stencil paste. So here are our mugs with the brown. They look beautiful. And speaking of stencil paste, I'm adding in the third layer of this stencil set. And this time I'm going to bring out Lunar Paste. I know, again, I'm obsessed with this stuff right now. And this is the color Gold Rush. I'm just using my palette knife and I'm going to apply some of that Lunar Paste into the openings, which have little stars and hearts, as well as the bottom of some of our coffee mugs, the little straw or sip opening for our coffee cups, and then one of the coffee cups has like steam coming out of it. So this is going to be really pretty. I'm excited to use this kind of bronzy gold with these colors. And let's take a look at the reveal. It's beautiful. I love this shine and the color of this gold, especially with this blue and green. So I'm going to clean up my desk and I'm going to finish stenciling off camera for my batch of cards. I'm making 12. So I'm going to move on to some die cutting while all those backgrounds dry. So I'm going to die cut my coffee mug out of this green pattern paper, and then the inside of the mug will have coffee inside of it. So I use some brown cardstock from my stash. Again, I will link as much as I can below, but the goal of these cards is to use up my pattern paper because I have way too much, and I have a lot of scraps of colored cardstock. So, doing my best to use what's in my stash because I somehow keep acquiring more paper. So, I'm gluing the coffee inside of my mug. This green paper is the same pattern paper pack as that brown houndstooth paper I showed earlier. I'm gluing my coffee so it kind of sticks a little bit past the die cut line of the mug. I wanted it to seem like that front of that mug is actually in front of the coffee and not like the coffee is just glued onto the mug. So that way there is a, if you look closely, it looks like the coffee is actually inside the mug when it's just a nice little die cut piece. I'm taking my dried background and I die cut all of these pieces 4 by 4 1/4, and then cut them so they're 2 by 4 1/4, which is part of the sketch. So that way I could get 2 pieces for each card done at a time. So instead of having to do 12 sets of stenciling, I only did 6, which was a lot. I die cut some blue cardstock for my 2 pieces here to fit, so my stenciled background and that brown houndstooth pattern paper. And again, I'm just following the sketch from Crafty Owl. Now she does have 3 different pattern papers total, but I only did 2. So there's like 2 different ones where my stenciled background is, but I wanted a lot of that stenciled background to show, so I just did 1 piece all the way through the card instead of 2 separate pieces, which will make sense when you watch Crafty Owl's video. So gluing them on and spacing them so that blue cardstock has a nice even border around all of my glued on background pieces. And I have my mug ready, so let's get a sentiment done. I'm grabbing the new stamp set Winter Drinks from Pretty Pink Posh, as well as its coordinating die and the Holiday Sentiments clear stamps, and I'm going to kind of DIY my own sentiment from these 2 stamp sets. So I'm going to put, "We wish you a latte joy." We wish you a latte joy. Sounds funny when you say it out loud. So I'm grabbing the latte sentiment, obviously, from the Winter Drinks clear stamps, and I love that the coordinating die cuts out this sentiment. I love curvy and scripty sentiments, and then I love even more when they have their own corresponding die cut. And then I grabbed the We Wish You A and Joy from that sentiment stamp set and die cut out my die. I will cut apart the rest later, but since I just freshly opened these products, I'm just die cutting what I need, or only taking the die cuts that I need out of the set of die cuts. And I have some white scrap paper from cutting all of those background pieces to stencil on. So I'm going to try and use up my scraps by stamping my sentiment onto this white piece of cardstock, and I'm using my little mini Misty to help me with stamping. So just putting the different stamps onto this white piece of cardstock, I'm going to die cut latte and then trim the other parts of the sentiment out. So I'm not really too worried about spacing or if it's terribly straight. I'm grabbing my VersaFine Clair in Twilight, my favorite ink for sentiments, and I'm stamping that onto my white cardstock and just using my little helper here to make sure I get a nice clean stamp, which I do one time and it looks great. I'm going to clean off my stamps, but I'm not going to take them out of my Misty because I have 11 more sentiments to stamp after I'm done with this video. And so I will put my ink away for now, but I will be stamping more. I'm going to grab some mint tape from scrapbook.com and I'm going to line up that die cut around the word latte. It has lots of openings, so you can line that up perfectly. And then I use the mint tape just to keep it in place so it doesn't move while I'm die cutting, and then I'll be sad. I'm using my little mini die cut machine from Huffy Doodle since it's so tiny and sits right next to me, and then I will pop out that sentiment. I'm going to grab my little poker tool so I can pop out any of the insides of my sentiment that were also die cut, like in, the around the T and inside the L, and etc. And once all of those little pop outs are out of my sentiment, I'm also going to grab my little mini trimmer and I'm going to cut some thin strips around my sentiment. Now this is a tiny piece of paper at this point, so I'm just grabbing a post-it note to give me a little bit more to hold onto while I trim this sentiment out. I probably could have just honestly grabbed my large scissors and cut it out, but I wanted my lines to be as straight as possible, at least for the top and bottom of my sentiment. I'm not always the best at cutting straight lines, but I will grab my tiny little paper snips to cut the other way, so vertically instead of horizontally, right? So I'm trimming horizontally my sentiments using my paper trimmer, and then I'm just going to grab scissors to cut vertically since it's a much smaller piece. They're about a 1/4 inch wide or tall. No, wide, tall. They're a 1/4 inch thick. And then here I am trimming down my sentiment. I was going to do kind of a banner look, but you'll see later I do end up trimming the banner part off because the sentiment weirdly lines up perfectly, that slanted cut with the edge of my mug, and I didn't really like it. I wanted you to still see some of the mug on the side of my sentiment. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So I do end up just cutting those straight later on. So I'm getting my sentiment kind of set up on my mug, and when I'm happy with the layout, I'm going to grab my wet glue and my tweezers to help, hold those small pieces of cardstock, and then I will use my fine tip on my glue to add glue to the sentiments. I have my mug right now sitting completely vertical, but I kind of remembered as I was about to glue that down that I wanted my mug to be a little bit tilted just to add a little bit of interest to the card and not make everything so straight up and down. So I tilted it onto my background so I can kind of see how my mug is going to be glued onto my card, and then place my sentiment straight down so you can read it and it's horizontal and not at an angle. So now I'm going to glue on the little strips. I'm doing joy on the bottom of latte, so it reads across. So we wish you a, and then latte, and then joy is more to the right. And then here's when I'm adding the top part of my sentiment. And like I said, it weirdly lines up perfectly with the edge of the mug, and I didn't really like that. So I'm grabbing my scissors and I'm just going to trim that down on the left, but because I trimmed the top one, I also wanted to trim the bottom one, so I do that as well. And that will finish up the sentiment on my mug. I'm going to grab some thin foam squares because I don't want too much bulk on the card, as these are, I make such a large amount and I sell them, so I didn't want it to be too thick for anyone who buys these cards. So I used some thinner foam squares and popped that right to the center of my background, but a little bit on the lower side. So not quite center vertically, but it is center horizontally. I'm using a lot of this vertical and horizontal terms in today's video. I have a top folding A2 card base in white cardstock, and then I'm using wet glue to glue that to the center of my card base. Here is a final look at my Latte Joy, really any occasion card. This is supposed to be a birthday card batch, but it's pretty generic and you really could use it for any occasion. But I hope you like my take on Crafty Owl's sketch and using some of these brand new products from Pretty Pink Posh. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!